that process of moving people by the Catholic Church. They'd be like, we got to shut this down. This is a crazy organization. You can't trust anybody.
Due to its long and storied past, the Vatican has always maintained an air of secrecy. However, the Church would likely rather remain silent about a few mysteries that lie behind all the sacred customs and ceremonies. Little do most people know, the Vatican has been involved in many dubious actions and covert goals throughout history. If you want to know 15 things the Vatican would rather you didn't know, you should join us. Number 15. Vatican bank scandals. If there is such a thing as a holy and ethical bank, it ought to be the Vatican Bank. On the contrary, the bank gained notoriety due to a series of scandals. This bank has had its reputation tarnished throughout decades of scandals, mismanagement, and corruption, despite its spiritual links. Since its inception in 1942, during the tumultuous days of World War II, to evade Allied financial constraints, the Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, has been engulfed in controversy. Because of its private and clandestine dealings, this institution became famous very fast. The Vatican Bank became famous as an offshore haven during World War II due to its immunity from financial investigations, which attracted clients seeking secrecy and anonymity. In the 1970s, nevertheless, the bank's reputation took a hit due to a number of dubious dealings, such as a $900 million scandal involving fake bonds and securities and money laundering. The head of the Vatican Bank and main security officer, Archbishop Paul Marinus, was an important actor. The collapse of the renowned Italian banker Michel Ciona was largely due to Marinus's hand in the scandal. Sandin lost $30 million when his financial enterprise fell. However, the bank's problems did not end there. Perhaps the most scandalous event was the demise of Banco Ambrosiano. As part of a settlement, the Vatican paid $244 million without denying any wrongdoing. This followed the disbursement of $1.4 billion in unsecured loans associated with Banco Ambrosiano by the Vatican Bank. Accounts purportedly set up to launder money through false organizations, embezzlement schemes, and mafia affiliations were among the alarming allegations made in a 2009 tell-all book by an Italian journalist about the bank's malfeasance. On top of that, 4 priests were implicated in mafia operations in 2012, and another priest was arrested the following year for allegedly assisting organized crime and channeling millions of dollars through the Vatican. The Vatican seems to prefer paying penalties rather than facing a full-on fight with criminal gangs, despite several scrapes with the law. The Catholic Church was in a state of panic to select a successor to Pope Benedict XVI following his unexpected departure in February 2013. Child abuse allegations dominated his papacy's headlines, and the Vatican's finances weren't exactly shining either. The Argentine Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Pope Francis I, breaking a record that had stood for more than 2,200 years. The Pope had to be from Europe. Pope Francis, who was born in Buenos Aires in 1936, is famous for his attempts to restore the Church's image and modernize it. Number 14. Vatican's secret alliance with the Nazis. Ex-Nazi officials were subject to arrest all throughout Europe in the tumultuous years following World War II, unless they had the proper connections. Remarkably, there were rumors that the Red Cross and the Vatican had assisted infamous Nazis in escaping. Overworked Red Cross officials allowed the Nazis to take advantage of their humanitarian help for refugees, the organization has acknowledged. But recent studies reveal that this exploitation was far more widespread than thought. According to hundreds of records discovered by Harvard scholar Gerald Steiner from the International Committee of the Red Cross, individuals like as Josef Mengele, Klaus Barbie, Adolf Eichmann, and others were able to evade trial by using military inspections and allusions to the Vatican. Nearly 90% of the 120,000 ex-Nazis who escaped through Italy did so with the aid of the Red Cross, which issued passports known as 10 to 100S to these wanted individuals. Providing fictitious identities to Nazi fugitives, was apparently another important duty undertaken by the Vatican's Refugee Committee. The Vatican remained silent and refused to comment or share its confidential archives as more and more evidence accumulated. According to Steiner, the fear of the Soviet Union and the desire to restore Christianity in Europe were the driving forces for the Vatican's assistance. Where things become dicey, though, is when the Vatican Refugee Commission, which purportedly helped innocent refugees, actually provided phony identities to war criminals. According to records, fresh Nazis were able to slip through the holes in the Red Cross offices in Geneva, Rome, and Genoa, falsely claiming to be ethnic Germans without a state in order to get transit documents. Former Schutzstaffel, SS members, frequently mixed with legitimate refugees. Worse yet, on occasion, Jews attempting to enter Palestine via Italy were combined with fleeing Nazis in a smuggling operation. Number 13. Complicity in the Rwandan genocide. Pope Francis officially apologized in 2017 for the role of the Catholic Church in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. Pope Francis expressed his hope that by humbly acknowledging the mistakes made at that time, which shamefully marred the Church's reputation, we can cleanse our memories and rebuild trust. Nevertheless, considering the severity of the crimes, many believed that an apology alone was inadequate. Furthermore, the Rwandan government had repeatedly asked the Vatican to issue an apology, and the only reason for this was that the government had asked them to. Amidst all the horror, not even the administration believed the Pope when he said those words. Accusations that Catholic clergy members enabled the massacre of the Hutu ethnic minority lingered from April to July 1994. Thousands of Rwandans who sought refuge in churches during the genocide perished in those very buildings, according to survivors and authorities. Everyone knows that churches are peaceful locations. After all, who would dare to harm others in such a sacred space? The confidence of the individuals they were entrusted to safeguard was broken by several Catholic clergy and nuns. Surprisingly, some religious leaders actually supported the criminals, while others concealed victims in their houses of worship. Tragically, 2,000 people lost their lives when Father Athanasius S.B. gave the order to destroy his church using bulldozers. Allegedly leading militia groups to convents where women and children sought refuge, Sisters Gertrude and Maria were also named in the indictment. Subsequent prosecution followed for SBA and the sisters as well. There are still difficult concerns of moral culpability stemming from the Church's complicity in the Holocaust. Beyond isolated incidents, word got out that some religious members either refused to take in Hutus or gave them over to militias. A significant decrease in Rwandans' faith in the Church was accompanied by the horrific reports of churches being used as locations for massacres. You now understand the reason behind the dramatic increase of Pentecostal churches in Rwanda. The locals claim that the remaining Catholic clergy members still deny any involvement in the slaughter. While outsiders insist the church was innocent, residents in the area hold a different view. Number 12. The Vatican's Exorcist Network. It may come as a surprise to discover that the Catholic Church has a team of exorcists available to assist in cases of possession or weird sounds. The Vatican has approved and educated this select number of priests to perform the centuries-old rite of exorcism. A large number of people have been practicing exorcism again during the 1990s, particularly with the formation of the International Association of Exorcists, despite the fact that the technique may appear to be a thing of the past or a horror film. With hundreds of thousands of exorcism petitions coming in every year, this association claims over 400 exorcists in Italy alone. One of the most renowned exorcists in Vatican history, the late Father Gabriele Amorth, said that he performed over 130,000 exorcisms throughout his lifetime. Become an exorcist trained by the Vatican, it's true. All it takes is passing the Church's course. Up to 250 priests from 50 different nations flocked to Rome in 2018 to acquire the necessary skills to recognize demonic possession. Additionally, they hope to learn about the rites of demon exorcism and hear anecdotes from other priests. There had never been a course like this worldwide lecture series, which took place in the Vatican for a whole week. Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation originally aired in 2005. The number of participating priests has increased by 100% since its inception. Exorcisms are discussed from a theological, psychological, and anthropological perspective at this $370 event. A number of Catholic priests in different nations have spoken to the media about a rise in reports of persons claiming to have experienced demonic possession. When priests encounter real spiritual disorders among their parishioners, Pope Francis emphasized in 2017 that they should not hesitate to refer them to exorcists. Just hearing that phrase made priests return to their old methods of exorcism. You may even obtain an exorcism using FaceTime. Yet, this tradition has also become contemporary, like everything else in the world. In 2018, Cardinal Ernest Simoni, who was 90 years old at the time, allegedly performed as many as 5 exorcisms every day over telephone. Bob Larson, who established the International School of Exorcism, pioneered the practice of digital exorcism by providing online sessions using video chat software like Skype. The expansion of the network and the training of priests engaged in exorcism are signs that the Vatican is now formally supporting this scary procedure as part of its spiritual obligations. In order to rule out the possibility of confusing possession with mental disease, they also work with medical experts. A growing number of people are seeking exorcisms even in the U.S., which, according to some experts, might be due to our increased exposure to scary television. Number 11. The Vatican's Hidden Courtroom. It wasn't until 2009 that the Apostolic Penitentiary, an ultra-secret tribunal established by Pope Alexander III in 1179, came to light after being hidden for over 8 centuries. This is no ordinary confession booth. It hears cases involving the gravest of crimes, the kind that not even the most powerful bishops can pardon. That decision can only be made by the Pope. The local priests often receive confessions of common moral sins, such as a husband admitting to infidelity, or a person reneging on their promise to remain pure. But the Pope must step in when serious transgressions like mass murder, genocide, or sexual indulgences by priests are considered. Such transgressions warrant direct confession to the Pope in order to get absolution. Even in that case, the Pope would not just forgive the wrongdoers. Instead, he would meet privately with his closest companions to consider the situation and reach a judgment. It seems somewhat similar to actual justice, doesn't it? It seems that even the most heartless of criminals may feel a longing for God's mercy. Opening to the public in 2009, this hidden apostolic penitentiary has heard horrific stories, but only the Pope knows the full depth of them. Number 10. Vatican Secret Archives. Were there any offspring of Jesus? Is there any special knowledge about the Illuminati that only the Vatican has? Is the Holy Grail real? Seems like there are more questions than answers, doesn't it? Perhaps there are many answers, but they are stashed away in the Vatican's secret archives, far from the reach of the general people. The Vatican Secret Archives store records that span over 1,000 years in its 53 million square feet of shelf space. Their presence is not hidden, despite the moniker. What is limited is access. After a thorough screening procedure, only a small number of researchers are granted access to these documents. The archives may upset the cornerstone of Christianity, according to long-running rumors, and the Vatican would never recover from it. Each pope has inherited these archives since 463 AD, and it takes 75 years after their formation before records are made public. The sensitive files have remained unprocessed due to this delay. The rumor mill has it that the archive holds documents pertaining to 2 major scandals: the accusation that the Catholic clergy mistreated minors, and the alleged assistance that Pope Pius provided to the Nazis. The renowned vaults are still shrouded in mystery, despite a 2019 rebranding as the Vatican Apostolic Archives. Number 9. Popes who chose to step down. Although the role of Pope may seem permanent, just 5 individuals have voluntarily stepped down from the position in the previous 1,000 years. As a young man in his 20s, Benedict IX was elected pope and spent 3 turbulent periods before stepping down. In 1045, he resigned from his job, returned, and then was expelled for good in 1047 after his marriage attempt failed. In 1045, Gregory VI resigned due to pressure. In 1294, Celestine V resigned because he was afraid he was too young. In 1415, Gregory XIV stood down to unite the Church, and in 1094, Gregory VI resigned due to pressure. The latter two were imprisoned till their deaths. Pope Benedict XVI was the most recent to step down in 2013, ostensibly due to health reasons but with whispers of internal strife in the Church. There hasn't been a pope's resignation in almost 600 years, in 1415. Therefore, this news hit the Catholic community like a ton of bricks. Whistleblowers exposed that Pope Benedict's butler, Paolo Gabriel, betrayed him, albeit it was true that he was elderly for the mountain of work he had to undertake. Even though they were like father and son, Gabriel eventually went public with documents that his employer had hidden at the Vatican because he was sick of hearing about the tragedies his boss had buried. Even if the Pope granted Gabriel a pardon later on, news of the situation had already spread. It seems that Pope Benedict XVI's departure was precipitated by the Vatican's big homosexual clergy problem. Even though it would be considered a crime in a normal society, he was aware that the Vatican Bank had used donor funds to settle lawsuits in order to cover up a series of abuses committed by clergy. Benedict made the tough choice to stay out of the scandal and the subsequent scrutiny. Number 8. The Vatican's love affair with wine. It would be a major problem for Vatican City if the concept of alcohol as a sin were to persist. With an annual consumption of around 74 liters, the Vatican City people consume more wine per capita than any other location on the planet. This is about 6 times higher than the U.S. consumption rate, and almost double that of France or Italy. What gives? The demographic here is predominantly male, older, and well-educated, and group dining is the norm. Furthermore, there is always an abundance of wine since it is utilized in religious rites. Nevertheless, that is only a perspective. You won't believe this, but the Vatican City actually has its very own supermarket, a name that subtly suggests smuggling, and they call it Spio Dell'Ona. Buying here is like entering a duty-free zone, thanks to the incredibly low tax rates. Those fortunate enough to own a Vatican pass can enjoy discounts comparable to those found on the airport's protected side. So, is the Vatican actually the best place to do duty-free shopping? To all appearances, it is. Some of the world's most expensive wines are supposedly sold at this market. Wine consumption in the Vatican automatically rises every year due to the fact that even visiting global leaders want a taste. Another thing is that the Pope and clergy have recently been rather amenable to the concept of complaining while eating. Recent remarks by Pope Francis have included his admiration for wine and his belief that it is a divine gift. Perhaps the only thing we have in common is the Pope's love of wine. No matter how heavy his load is, an honest man's task isn't complete without a delicious glass of wine. Number 7. Pope Benedict XVI's controversial Nazi past. Although he was born Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI got into trouble in 1943 for being drafted into the German anti-aircraft corps when he was still a seminarian. His election as pope was overshadowed by his brief association with the Hitler Youth. Images taken in 2005 depict him in his uniform at a plant that employed slave laborers. He was a prisoner of war after his 1945 desertions. The family of the Pope, according to stories, was actually extremely kind toward Jews and was coerced into participating in Hitler's nefarious plots. The Nazis were deeply reviled by Ratzinger's family, especially by his father. The whole family was subjected to persecution and demotions as a result of his open resistance. Since March 1939, when participation became obligatory for all German boys of that age, Ratzinger was drafted into the Hitler Youth once he turned 14 in 1941. His brother claims that Ratzinger was unenthusiastic and would often skip meetings because of it. Supposedly, the future pope also assisted a Jewish child with Down syndrome. Thus, any images of him near death camps were only coincidental. The Allied denazification eventually exonerated him, removing all accusations of anti-Semitism, although the matter is still talked about. Several members of the Catholic clergy had wholeheartedly joined Hitler's missions after all. Rumor has claimed that the Vatican has files on those associated with it. Nevertheless, no one would ever learn their identities. Number 6. The dupe orphans tragedy. There seems to be no end to the Vatican's financial scandals. There were thousands of abandoned children between 1935 and 1964. Some of them were born into prostitution or were taken into state care by relatives. Many of these institutions, including mental hospitals, nurseries, and orphanages, were run by Catholic communities. For some reason, the kids in these programs had this naive notion that they were safe under the church's watchful eye. Those kids were supposedly only having checks with the physicians when one day they were made to behave crazy. To get more money out of the government, Premier Maurice Duplessis of Quebec classed thousands of orphans as mentally ill, with the support of the Catholic Church. The terrible outcome was that more than 20,000 children, dubbed the dupe orphans, had needless lobotomies, shock treatments, and other brutal procedures. This experience has a long-term impact on these kids. Minimal care and harsh punishment were common experiences for the children housed in these facilities. Some of them were ill-treated, neglected, or abused. Members of the clergy or their guardians would often beat their charges severely with leather straps or wooden rods. After leaving the facility, these kids had a terrible time adjusting to outside life and eventually vanished. Pauline Gill's 1991 publication of Leon Found Duplessis brought their story back into the forefront after a 20-year hiatus. This book revealed the Vatican's enormous avarice and paved the way for several other tales from the youngsters. They prevailed in their fight for a settlement with Quebec in the end, but the Church has still not officially apologized. Number 5. Secret children of priests. Picture yourself pushed into a life without a father figure, especially one who is still physically present but unable to provide